You're listening to Engage, the podcast for Delta pilots. Here's your host, Ryan Argenta.
Welcome back to the Engage podcast. Today we're talking an all-call for volunteers at the Delta MEC. This is working for ALPA. And I'm here with Shane Corbett, the Delta MEC Secretary. I'm also here with Jason Depew, who's a volunteer in communications, works with us here at the Engage podcast. And then there's me, also a volunteer at the Delta MEC. And so there is a push to get good volunteers with experience or an interest in a particular area. There's so many committees. There's a lot of openings that are available for pilots to come and work for their union. And we say volunteer, but it is paid gig. But first of all, Shane, Jason, welcome back to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Yep, good to be here. So it looks like there's a call for volunteerism at the union, at the Delta MEC. What's behind that? We all have our own stories. There's maybe misperceptions or misunderstanding. I want to volunteer at the union, but how do I get my foot in the door? There's some thoughts that you have to know somebody on the inside to get in on the inside, and that's certainly not true. So why don't you kick it off for us? What's the overall deal with volunteering at the Delta MEC?
So we have a new administration. We saw some turnover in some of our committees, and the committee structure remained intact. But as we move forward, we're trying to rebuild some of our committees that may have lost a few volunteers over the last several months. The Delta MEC has 25 standing committees. So those are full-time committees, and they're supported by 19 subcommittees, which is probably one of the largest committee structures in ALPA. We have anywhere between 300 to 500 volunteers at any given time. And I'll get into the different levels of volunteerism at the different levels in the committees, but all of those committees support the 16,000 Delta pilots. What we're looking at right now is we have thousands of pilots, and we have needs in the committee structure, anywhere from contract administration to scheduling. And we're looking for line pilots that want to come and give back to their fellow pilots.
Yeah, so let's share out a couple ideas. We don't have to go through all the committees, but some common ones, big ones that people hear of is the scheduling committee. Hotel committee is popular, but there's a lot in safety. There's central air safety. There's working with the ASAP program, working with the company in that regard. There's scope. There's some higher level stuff, contract administration, as you mentioned, communications, which includes the podcast and writing. So there's a wide variety of things that you could participate in. And I want to turn to our own stories here. Shane, what was your story? Because we started working together in 2018. And we were just comm bros.
Yep.
We worked in the comm hallway, and you were working DPN at the time.
Yep.
So what's your story there?
Yeah, I had a friend that we were a new hire class together at Delta, and she called me up one day out of the blue and asked if I'd be interested in doing ALPA work. And at the time, I was just an MD-80 FO flying 4-day trips a month, doing the grind. And it sounded like a nice opportunity to sort of break up the monotony of line flying a little bit. I'd done a little bit of ALPA work before at my old airline, but this would have been my first opportunity at Delta to do union work. So I raised my hand and said, sure, I'll come in. I started off in the Delta Pilot Network, which is basically like an outreach program for engagement, and we do disaster assistance and relief efforts. And I did that for a number of years and then got into communications. I was communications vice chair for a couple of years and then filled in for the comm chair position during the end of negotiations until this year when I raised my hand to be elected as secretary of the NBC.
Two things I want to mention. One is, do you have to have previous union or ALPA experience to volunteer now?
Absolutely not.
And so those in military positions, or maybe you hadn't worked for your union at your regional or corporate job, doesn't matter. It's a skill set or an interest even, and you can be trained in those positions. So not a requirement. And then the other differentiation is we use the word volunteer. They are compensated. They are paid positions. We'll get into the details here in a second, but now you moved from, quote, a volunteer, right, working with DPN, then you were the comm chairman, which is still a volunteer position, but it's a full-time position. You live in Atlanta, so that would appeal to you, perhaps. But now you're in an elected position, and that's a whole different ball of wax, which will probably be another podcast.
Right. Yeah. We'll get into full-time, part-time volunteer work, but my current position as an elected officer of the MEC, there are a handful of positions that are elected by the body, which is the Delta MEC, which are your elected union representatives. And they elect the chair, the vice chair, the secretary, the treasurer, and those are the officers of the MEC. They also elect committees like the negotiating committee members. That election just occurred this last August. And then we also have a merger committee. If that were ever need to be stood up, those positions are also elected. Other positions like contract admin chair, scheduling chair, those are appointed positions or confirmed positions by the MEC. So the MEC chair selects that position and they're confirmed by the MEC.
Yeah. And you're likely not to raise your hand and say, I'm really good at contracts. I want to work in contract administration. It's unlikely that they're going to say, here, you're the vice chairman or you're the chairman, right? You come in and you do some foundational work, you get the lay of the land. And then if you'd like to, you work your way up to that. Jason, you have a bit of a different story where you didn't know anybody on the inside, but you did have a skill set of writing and communicating. So how did you hear about union work? How did you get involved here?
I knew that it was an opportunity. I'd flown with people on different committees. I'd scheduling committee vice chairman and a hotel committee vice chairman and heard the kind of things they did. I was like, wow, it's interesting. You're making a big difference for the pilot group. Thanks. And then I've been a fan of this podcast since the very start. So I would always send you darts, hey, either fan mail or, hey, let's cover this. Let's get an episode about this. Selfishly wanting good answers for myself. I think I eventually just annoyed you enough that the comp committee held a summit and they brought a bunch of potential volunteers in for a week to learn the ropes and see what's going on. And a lot of us had never done any alpha work at all and just get to know each other, get to see what's going on. And then you said, hey, want to help with podcasts? I'm like, I listen to a podcast. Okay, sure. I'll help and train me up and show me what to do. Here I am.
Yeah. And I think that's a great example. We're going to be seeing a lot more of those types of summits. We call it a summit, but it's basically an open house. Look in the MEC news. There will be vacancies posted for volunteer positions. There's a volunteer resource page where you can list particular things you're interested in. I'll link that to the description of this podcast. Yeah, look for the MEC news and the union will bring in these, basically an open house. Come in, take a look, see what your union looks like, see what the MEC looks like. And they discuss different volunteer opportunities. It's essentially a trip to Atlanta to check things out. And then if there's a mutual interest, then you can continue. And that's how we found Jason. And he's been a great addition to both COM and to the Engage podcast. So thanks for sharing that. Let's get to the nitty gritty. We've been saying volunteers get paid. What do we get paid?
There are a couple ways pilots can get paid for doing ALPA work. Let's say that you have a trip. Let's say you're a brand new ALPA volunteer. You didn't get opportunity to pre-post. And I'll get back to that in a second. ALPA days for your schedule. If you get a trip drop or you get reserve days dropped, you're compensated for that trip. Generally, when you pre-post, you're going to get 5 hours and 15 minutes of pay per day of work.
Pay and credit
on your schedule. And those days are pre-posted to your schedule. So when you're doing your PBS bidding, those days are blocked. So you can't get trips awarded over those days.
And you get credit towards the line construction window.
Right.
So you don't have to fly a full schedule and do union work. I think that's much different on the company side, that the union pays pay and credit, also builds you towards the green slip trigger for those who are interested in flying extra. And I think that, again, is different than the company side that is pay with no credit. And then, yeah, if you have a trip that's dropped, you get pay protected for the value of that trip.
Correct.
If you pre-post, then it's part of your monthly bid schedule.
Correct.
And you can shift that around as needed. What else we get?
You're paid at your hourly rate for the category you fly. For most volunteer positions, you are able to do some expenses like meals, mileage on your car. If you commute to the airport to fly here or drive to the office in Atlanta.
What about positive space for those who don't live near Atlanta?
So volunteers that commute to Atlanta, you get positive space travel to and from wherever you live. Plus you get a hotel here in Atlanta. Generally, we're at the Renaissance. Our office is located right next to the Renaissance Hotel. So you get hotels while you're here in Atlanta. The ancillary benefit of that is you get the hotel points, stay credits, etc. for that.
And there's a per diem, right?
There is a per diem. Yep.
There's some work from home opportunities that exist. You don't always have to come into Atlanta. It could be a hybrid depending on where you live. And that's approved by the administration on case by case basis. The goal here is to get good volunteers from around all the pilot bases. It doesn't matter where you live. You know, the RCC committee chairman lives in Hawaii and does a little bit of both. So some examples there.
What's kind of an expectation for a part-timer? How much time are they usually expected to spend here in Atlanta?
If they pre-post or let's say they work 1 week a month in the office, they're expected to be here for that 1 week. And Ryan mentioned work from home. Our policy manual does allow work from home on an individual case-by-case basis. And that, again, is approved by the 4 officers of the MEC. We live in the 21st century. We all were working on computers. Remote work is something that's being done in corporate America all over the place. And I think there's definitely room for that at the MEC. The one issue is, of course, that our fellow line pilots, they don't have the opportunity to work from home. They've got to get in their car, drive to the airport, commute to go fly their trip. So we want to make sure that we're conscious of that when we're making these decisions. And there's a lot of work that is done that's measurable, that can be done from anywhere. And we definitely we take that into account and we take it very seriously. But there are some volunteers who get some work from home, remote work. We do have some annexed office space in Seattle and Minneapolis and Detroit that is utilized by a few volunteers on a case by case basis, because it is, trust me, I went out to Seattle for the MEC meeting, and that 5-hour flight, I can't imagine doing that on a week by week basis that some of our volunteers do. So I definitely give it credence, and I understand the difficulty when it comes to that.
Absolutely. So we talked about some of the benefits and the pay, but there's work to be done. And that's one thing that I learned was, okay, being compensated for our time. And I think during that communication summit where we had 10 people come in and you get the tour and the dog and pony show, and then you realize, wow, the union does a ton of work. And that's a good vetting process, because some of those people said, look, I don't have that time available to come to Atlanta and work 12, 13-hour days. And not that it's that way all the time, but I do want to be real about it and not sugarcoat it. We do work long hours, late hours sometimes. Working from home even is sporadic. What can volunteers expect as far as a work day, or what does volunteering entail?
Yeah, the volunteer aspect of this job is the fact that it is work. You're expected to work whatever job it is that you have. The benefit of that is you get to learn the contract. You get to become a subject matter expert on whatever area you're working in. The expectation is that you come to the office and you're here for 7 hours, 8 hours. Sometimes you might get a phone call or an email on a weekend or at night, and you're expected to be able to maybe answer that, or at least have someone available to answer that. It just depends on what job you have in the union. Some work is literally a 9 to 5. You're answering emails during the workday because that's just how your committee operates. Like scheduling, for instance, we have a scheduling department that has a large 9 to 5 presence. And that's what those volunteers are expected to do. We have a training committee that works Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, but sometimes they get calls at 9, 10 o'clock at night from some guy who just got out of the D period. So it runs the gamut.
Sure. And actually, that's a good segue into interest, right? We talked about if you have experience here, or you're good at writing, or you know the contract well. But the flip side of that is gaining an inside peek into how the union works, how the company works. And every time I'm in the office, I'm amazed that I always go home. I just learned all about this. Like last night, I learned more about the rotation construction committee and the bid packages than I'd ever known. And I've been here for almost 10 years. There is that aspect of it. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, man, I wish I knew more about bidding or about how to use PBS, volunteer for the PBS committee. And they're going to teach you all their tips and tricks, which is plug for the PBS podcast we have. But those are opportunities that exist too. I wish I knew my contract better. I wish I knew scheduling better. Volunteer in those positions. And if you do volunteer, is there a timeline, a minimum amount of time? Do you have to work for the union for a year or 6 months, or can you just come and go? Hey, this isn't for me. I need to go back. What are we looking for?
Yeah, there is no commitment when you sign up. I'll speak for the scheduling committee here. If you do sign up for the scheduling committee, there is an intensive training course that they put you through so that you can look at a schedule, an iCrew or an ACE report, and you're able to understand Section 23 or Section 12 of the contract and apply it to that pilot's issue. So they put you through training. So there's an expectation that since they spent the time and the money, that you do stick around and volunteer. If they don't put a time on it, it's like the honor system that you promise you will put in the time and effort after getting trained. But you can come in here and not have a clue what Section 23 says, and they will train you up. That's the same goes for contract admin. You don't have to be a contract expert to work for contract administration. You just have to have the desire and the ambition and really to put in the effort and help your fellow pilots out when they have issues with the contract.
I think it goes toward dispelling a myth that I hear a lot. Like you have to have previous Alpha experience. You have to have done contract admin or whatever before. You don't. And maybe you're in the union in the past, maybe not. Maybe you're a military person, right? And you were on staff or, worked in some shop in your squadron. You've got the basic skills. You're teachable, and you can come here and the union can teach you whatever you need to know to do any job pretty much.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you have an interest in retirement insurance, I know you, Jason, you do.
Yep.
We have a robust R&I committee that is staffed by people who may not have a background. They're not investors necessarily, or they don't have an insurance background, but they just have an interest in it and they like learning about it and they like helping their fellow pilots with those issues.
Yeah. And kind of capstone this with the pilot advocacy portion of this, right? Yeah, you're coming in, you're compensated for volunteering, but what I love about it is that pilot advocacy. I feel like doing the podcast is a service for the pilots. I feel that we do a pretty good job at it. We love hearing from pilots, so please keep those darts coming. We take all your feedback, and it feels good, right? It feels good to do that work for pilot advocacy. I know contract administration, you were talking about, you'll be trained. scheduling, you'll go through that vigorous training and how to help people. But then when you get to that first phone call, or you get a phone call from a pilot who's, hey, I'm in a pinch and here's the situation, help me out. And you can help. It's the ability to help and advocate for those pilots. And then it opens you up. You learn so much more about committees that you've never even heard of. I'm going to link all the committees and subcommittees to the description of the podcast as well. Again, alpa.org/DAL gets you to the Delta MEC webpage, and you can look at all the committees and you can see publications and get a feel for where you'd want to go and what you'd want to do. But that pilot advocacy piece is huge. And everybody's working for the pilots, but it's that one-on-one that really gets it going. So we've talked about all that stuff. So how do you volunteer?
There's a number of ways. One way that I would suggest is reach out to your elected union representatives. They're more in touch with the committee structure. They know what's going on. And if you don't know who your elected representatives is, you can go to dal.alpa.org and go to your council page. If you live in Salt Lake, you're based in Salt Lake, you're Council 81. You can reach out to your reps and ask, hey, I'm interested in volunteering for ALPA. Do you know of any committees that are in need? The other way is the volunteer tab that we had mentioned earlier. Basically, it pre-populates your name, email, phone number, and it lists all the committees there, and you can click on which ones you're interested in. I suggest that maybe pick a handful, because that submission will go to each committee chair. And so if you're really interested in training committee or contract admin or scheduling, select those committees directly, and you'll be reached out to by someone from that committee. The other way is how we all got into it was you knew somebody. So if you know somebody that does ALPA work, reach out to them and say, hey, I'd like to get into ALPA work. Do you know of any places where I could land? Or vice versa. We as volunteers can reach out to our friends or our people we may know and say, hey, you're good at X. I want you to come and do some ALPA work. There's some different ways.
And if those channels aren't working out for you, and if all else fails, send a dart to the Engage podcast or to communications, and I'll point you in the right direction. We'll help you out and get you set up. So reach out any way that you can. Those are the preferred methods. I would use the form on the website, but you can reach out to your reps for sure and give it a go. I think every pilot really at some point should do some union work just to see the other side of it.
Yeah, I agree. Going through the last several years that I went through, between contract negotiations to COVID to getting back into negotiations and finally getting this contract done, I saw probably more than most would see in an entire career of ALPA work. And I look forward to the day when I go back and go fly full time on the line again. But the years I spent in the ALPA office, I've met more friends and created lifelong friendships, which you don't get that opportunity on the line. And that's a huge part of this, is the camaraderie that you develop and the fellowship with your fellow pilots doing union work.
That's been a big benefit for me. I miss being part of a flying squadron in the military. It's a squadron of 80 people, built-in friends, and you hang out all the time. And you don't have that as an airline pilot. So to be able to come here and run into the same people and, hey, buddy, how's it going? Good to catch up. And, oh, here's a dinner push. Let's go. That's awesome.
Yeah. Fire up the lunch bus.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great point as well. It's a really great team here. So come join us.
From an education standpoint, I volunteer for the comm committee, but we're always talking to people for every committee and go to dinner with them, or, hey, sit in on this. And so I've learned about rotation construction, contract admin, and scheduling, just casually chit-chatting with people. And you can just absorb so much. It's really valuable.
Yeah, I learned a lot in communications because you worked with every committee.
Yeah, very good.
And I'll one more thing I would want to say is the other thing about ALPA work, and we mentioned it a little bit earlier, is that everything we do here is forwarding the profession, is forwarding everything for the Delta Pilot Group. We're not working against ourselves. We're making sure that our contract is implemented correctly. We're making sure that we get paid for that reroute. We're making sure that if Houston gets hit by a hurricane, we're reaching out to those pilots who live in Houston, make sure they're okay. So everything we do here is for the benefit of ourselves and the group as a whole, which I think is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to cover, what about new hires? If you're on probation or new hire, can you volunteer?
So typically we ask that pilots get off probation first before volunteering.
Okay, very good. Any other shots?
We have a handful of committees looking for volunteers.
Who specifically is looking right now that's like a hot item for you?
So I don't want to speak necessarily for each of these committees, but I'll tell you just based on what I hear, the scheduling committee has a huge team, and they're always looking for good, talented volunteers. Contract admin, as our new contract is implemented, they're looking for some extra hands. The training committee is looking for some extra hands. Membership. A big one is communications. As a former comm chair, I can tell you that job, while enjoyable, is not the easiest job, but it's fun. And we're looking for a new comm chair, comm vice chairs, and comm volunteers. It's just best to reach out to the committee structure, submit that volunteer form, and find a place for you.
Absolutely. You heard it here. I recommend it. I think Jason does too.
Absolutely.
Shane Corbett, Delta MEC Secretary. Thanks for the push. Keep your eyes out. We'll push it out in the MEC news, some vacancies or ways to volunteer. And again, it's linked to the description of this podcast. So come join us.
You're listening to Engage, the podcast for Delta pilots. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or your favorite podcast platform, and receive notifications when a new episode is available.